Welcome. I'm Andrea Simic, Chair of the Department of Architecture at Cornell University. I would like to do just a brief intro to this very unusual situation and to say something perhaps a little bit trite, that these are incredible times and difficult times, but in all of the difficulty emerges amazing opportunities for creativity and initiative for the first time that we've never done before. So I just wanted to welcome all of you to this virtual talk, and especially not just our students of Cornell and our faculty, but also to the students and faculty of both Cooper Union and GSD. For all three of our institutions had invited Jan de Vylder to offer a lecture to our constituents. So I wanted to welcome all of us together. And this is really a first time that we've ever done this before, so we're really looking forward to many more of these as we move forward. So I would like to first briefly introduce Felix Heisel, who is a recent assistant professor in the Department of Architecture. He began with us this January, and I've asked him to do an introduction to the lecture, which we're very much looking forward to. So without further ado, let me introduce Felix Heisel. Thank you. I gave you a promotion.
Good afternoon, Cornell, GSD, and Cooper Union, wherever you are in the world right now. I also want to extend greetings to Zurich. Guten Abend dort. I heard that you're also listening in. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you all to this lecture here from the unfortunately empty Milstein Hall at the Cornell University. In these strange and scary times of a global pandemic and social distancing, the world seems suddenly very, very small in many ways. On the positive side, as Andrea just mentioned, this is the first time a lecture like this is simultaneously attended by 4 universities. And it feels good to stand back here and return to some kind of routine, to think about architecture in these times for the next hour, or better in this case, to listen to one of our esteemed colleagues, Jan de Vylder, lecture about his research and practice. I am Assistant Professor Felix Heisel here at the Cornell University, and I'm also the director of the Cornell Circular Construction Lab. We focus on the paradigm shift of how to redirect our construction industry from a linear material system to a circular economy. And within this field, and especially in regard to the treatment of and the interaction with the existing built environment, our guest, Jan de Vylder, exercises an extreme sensibility and creativity that I admire very much. I'm thus very happy to give this introduction to you. Jan de Vylder is the co-founder of architecten Vylder and Vinck taillieu, as well as more recently architecten Vylder and Inge Vinck. And I find it important to mention that this office also has a mirror name, architecten Inge Vinck Jan de Vylder, which I think in these times is important. In regard to his teaching and research as professor for architecture and construction at the ETH Zurich, his studio goes by yet another name, its alter ego, Universum Carrousel Journey, as an ever-ongoing exploration of a world to be created. Lastly, Jan is this semester's Gensler visiting critic at the Department of Architecture at Cornell University. As mentioned, within Jan's diverse body of work in built products, projects, research, and exhibition, I personally am intrigued by the recurring theme of the existing as the starting point of this journey. Or to say it in his words, what is here and what could this here become tomorrow? This question might have been the reason he won the competition for the St. Joseph building of the Caritas Psychiatric Center in Mel in Belgium, which was finished in 2016 and in 2019 was a finalist to the Mies van der Rohe Award, as well as in 2018 as part of the exhibition Free Space won the Silver Lion at the Venice Biennale. The here in this building was a ruin. The deconstruction of the existing building had already been started at the time the competition began. And the here tomorrow, in this case, turned into a usable ruin with a multitude of in and outside spaces for the healing of the mind. I leave it up to Jan to explain the project. However, I do want to point your attention to the interaction between the old and the new. Jan told me yesterday, it is not about reuse per se, but about how to reuse. Architectural reviews Douglas Murphy described the moments in the project as clear examples of the aleatoric gestures that find their way into many of their projects, where errors or surprises on site become the source of new and intriguing elements. These stabilizing elements are similar to the sort that one finds in ruined homes and castles, ad hoc structural and weathering details for the sole purpose of arresting decline, and whose outsiderish juxtapositions nevertheless, or in fact directly, give great aesthetic pleasure. The Biennale jury described the building as a project that possesses a confidence thanks to which slowness and waiting allow architecture to be open to future activation. And it is this understanding of the built environment as a material depot for future activation that I believe we all need to work towards. On this personal note, in 2017, two of my students at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology at that time referred to the St. Joseph in their own proposal at for the Urban Mining Student Award, and ended up winning due to their sensible approach to the existing building and its materiality. I am certain that today's lecture, with the very fitting and optimistic title, "That it does not look good, makes it look good," similarly inspires all of us in such a positive and productive way. Please join me in digitally welcoming Jan de Vylder.
Okay, thank you. It is said that I only can spend 50 times of your very slow life at the moment for everyone, I think. And even though I want to thank, first of all, the Cornell community to have invited me this year to be part of it, and in what a time frame. I am lucky to be here, honestly. And so I will not go into detail. Felix, I thank you. Andrea, I thank you, especially for being so patient with me. Thank you very much. But everyone from the Cornell community, I really am thankful to, and I hope in near future we can make a full semester again when things turn back to good. And first slide, that it does not look good makes that it looks good is the name of a project I will talk about later. The title back yesterday, I thought, like, what a moment to come up with such a title, being today that it does not look good. Okay, first project. This is a project I introduce you immediately in the deep fields of Flanders. This is the Flemish Ardennes, a kind of starting point of this Ardennes in France. And the project we talk about is right in the middle on the spot. It's an old cafe, old family piece, young people heritage. But look around to the landscape of Flanders, how densely it is lived, at the same time, how green it is still. This is what they inherited, young people, Piet and Ellen. And this is a very nice old building. You see the status. It's in fact nice, but it's nothing specific. It's nice because of the idea of the family that has lived there for ages. Above the cafe, which is in front, 13 children were born. And one can understand then that this building is in such a bad condition after. They had inherited it, and it came in fact far too early in their lives, and they had only kind like budget like $100,000 at that time, even not. And the only thing we could think about in that sense is that we should shift thinking the making of the house. And we redefined all was what's needed to build a house into a kind of scheme of materials, so that by their own power, their own capacity, they could make their house. And this is a model, large-scale model we made, to explain what the idea was. And what you see is exactly what you see. It's a kind of scaffolding system based on concrete formwork systematics and combined with glazed windows inside the building. And it is delivered next to the first instructional photo of the model. On the other hand, a kind of model that also could help to understand what the quality of space could be. Finally, the house became this. Scaffolding as said, greenhouse technology for the new glazed house in the old house. It's also winter when you want to have more space or when you want to profit of the light around. This is the space. All existing floors has been taken out and a new glazed house came in between. And what you see in between is in fact a huge, almost 1 meter space of air helping to change the climate of the house. No insulation on the outside, but just the fact that there are 2 climates into the house. And of course, this is very attractive to talk about this house as such nowadays, because we are all in this thinking of climate and sustainability, and we should, of course. But on the other hand, for us, the message is slightly different. We wanted to keep thinking about the idea, what is exactly the idea of, let's say, how to live a house. This is the image I like to stand still with for a moment. One has a chimney. Maybe the chimney was not really needed, but at the end, in the winter, it's really nice. And the position of the chimney towards the old chimney is almost merely in my interest. Instead of keep on repeating that it has its advantages in the way of climate, in the way of energy, and so on. For me, it has mostly as advantages that it is another way of living in a house, and on top, a way of living in a house that could be built by the family themselves. I show this images because for me, architecture is of course a message of form. We need to make things, to give things form, but at the same time, architecture is also a message of life. In the meantime, the kitchen has been changed without the architect, and I think it's a very good message in that sense. But look where it is about. It's about living it in a certain way. Simple, decent, but everything available. We walk up to the bathroom, but there is something else in the house, and this image is a little bit unsharp, but it doesn't matter maybe. It's about one facade of the house. As you've seen, the house is totally loose. The new glazed house is totally used from the old house. But on one side, we needed to touch the outside facade, and then, of course, one has to insulate to do energy savings. And this is a drawing that represents that a little bit fuzzy photo from before, image from before. And it represents the beauty of the old facade of brick layers, these old bricks that has been there for centuries, and walls that has been washed out a little bit, and the beauty of it. Finally, we covered it with insulation, as we should do, but we covered it also with, my opinion, nice cement tiles. But on those cement tiles, we added a drawing. Because with the client we talked, and of course one need to have a good understanding with his clients. With the clients we talked and we said like, well, wouldn't it be nice that maybe next to all the things one has to do to create a house, we also might think about things that are not really necessary, but that are maybe about what architecture also could be. And we together developed an idea of redrawing the idea of the brick wall on the slides. What an effort for nothing. But to us, an addition to what architecture also could mean. This is a photo when you approach the house, the wall. It's an image from Philippe Dujardin, who we called the fifth Beatle of the team always. See how he depicts here the whole Flemish area. And here we go closer by. And of course, what you will see there, not everyone will see it. But then, the moment it comes into your eyes, it opens your thoughts. What's this? What it's about? Who has done it? What is the message? We believe that in architecture, and even especially also in these days in life, we can rediscover meaningless things that at the end might mean a lot for a lot of people and all in different way. This is the facade of the house. As you can see, we did not really renovate this because there is a new house in the house. But for example, one has on top the attic that we live now. In the early days, it was never lived, and it needed light. We did not put this kind of typical windows in the plain field of the roof, but we copied the trompe-l'œil window from the existing facade one time more. This time it's not a trompe-l'œil window, it's a window as it is, but the sides of the dormer are mirrored out. I don't want to comment that too much, but maybe I just want to comment it with this kind of slide. Something I picked up in the CCA in Montreal. Gordon Clark, here is what we have to offer you. Confusion guided by a clear sense of purpose. Second project. As mentioned by Felix, I'm happy that I can explain it a little bit more deeper. It's the project of Caritas, so the mental health care institute in Melle, near to Ghent. And do allow me to take you a little bit more in the history of the whole thing, because for me this is also extremely important in how architecture is made or can be made. This first image is an image we made on the occasion of the competition we were invited in. And please keep in mind the three white little additions to the buildings. Well, not additions, I will tell you later. And in the middle, the building the competition was really about. This healthcare institute, psychiatric clinic, has been established around 1910 something, somewhere. And it has been established by the Sisters of Mercy. One has to imagine that before that, people with psychiatric diseases were mostly locked to protect them to themselves and to protect the society against these people. And they were, at that time in the city of Ghent, middle of the city in an area locked. Well, things change. One comes in 1900s and so on. Visions on psychiatry luckily change. And the Sisters of Mercy make this plan to have a kind of large campus with all kind of buildings for which, for the first time almost, the different diseases are located in different areas and buildings. And good to know is that the Sisters of Mercy were not only about mercy, but they were also very good managers. At that time, psychiatry changes, and also the psychiatry comes a little bit fashionable, like in the higher cultural scenes or amongst the richer. And so, for a part on the left side, there are some buildings which were hotels for the ladies to come in the weekend and enjoy a kind of therapy. And they paid for it. And with that money, they could pay off the right side, which was really the psychiatric clinic. They were good managers. This plan has been repeated 5 times. I believe 2 times in the Netherlands, 2 times in Germany, and 1 time in Belgium. And each time also, the workers traveled around to realize this project in the small area of Europe. Enfin, take notice of that, but it's important to understand that economy is always around, like in the first project. The basic idea is how to realize, how to get it paid. Beautiful as it is, 1910, 1920, everything goes right. See this. We move on. One sees that buildings are added and some has disappeared. And this was a situation how we found it the moment of the competition. Almost half of the buildings were gone and replaced, like from the 60s on, with new buildings. And you can see it on the model. We are all architects with their own architecture. The architecture, which was merely, let's say, a sign of its time. Not only that, but mainly really hospital architecture. And it was fading away. There was a competition a couple of years ago in which 3 architects were invited, and in which we were lucky to be invited. Sorry, I go back. We were lucky to be invited, and although there was one question raised, and the one question raised was about that kind of, you see the dark gray building, the villa where we talk about, the pavilion we talk about later. We were interested in thinking about a wider scale of understanding. And in fact, we gave 3 answers, though there was only one question raised. The 2 other questions were not raised. And first was our interest as this idea of unity was fading away, and the director, the young director, who was at that moment at the hospital, said, okay, maybe the old buildings we cannot readapt to new standards and new expectations, but we have a heritage to protect. How can we protect that heritage? Do we just fade it away? Or can we maybe use that heritage to change our thinking in space for psychiatry? What could those spaces deliver us different from the regulated square meters, regulated program? That was a topic about that building in the middle. The next building, in fact, this one here at the corner. But we, as said, we answered 3 times. And the first answer we gave is that we were interested in finding a new logic, in finding a new way to reconnect the site at least a little bit. Of course, the ambition would have been totally wrong to go back for a unity of architecture as such. But the first thing we looked at, we went and we walked around and we carefully observed all buildings. And the first answer on a question that was not being raised is that we said, well, as all the buildings need to change sooner or later, let's develop a vocabulary, a vocabularium, by which we give each building a kind like of wide, new loggia. Because people are walking around, and they're always stopping here and there, and as I showed in the beginning here, the second on the above row is a beautiful original one which inspired us to suggest all the other ones. Finally, this delivered this model. Still, the answer that needed to be given was not given. Secondly, now you understand this image. Secondly, we made a huge model. Again, an answer on a question that was not being raised. And the model we used not only to explain the project, but also to explain our attitude by saying, listen, if we accept this job, or if you accept our proposal, we want to go for a long-term talk. Because at the end, your question, what can we do with the building? Advise us. If we can't do anything with it, then we demolish it. But the question had no program, no idea, and the question was to us how to react with the building, understanding that you were looking for new understandings of space and architecture, space architecture and psychiatry. So we said, if you allow us to be your partner, we will serve you with models and drawings, explaining how space can evolve, talking not only with your doctors and therapists and practitioners, but maybe also with those who live there, to arrive to the idea that our participation in this competition will not deliver an endpoint, but becomes the start of a longer talk. Answer number 2 on a question that had not been raised. Finally, the project, the real answer. This is the building, long time ago, mentioned again the loggia in front. This is the building, how we found it. Because that director, young director, guy of my age, a little bit older, when he arrived there, he found this building like this. There was a twin building on the other side, which was already demolished. This was on its way, but they had to stop it because they found asbestos. There, this director bought time to go back with his team and to try to find a way to widen up the idea on what to do with the heritage. He was connected to a young guy, Gideon Bois, from the collective BAVO, philosopher and architect, a young guy really specialized in this kind of things, like, for example, what does space do for young children in psychiatry? Because honestly, this is the reality of the whole scenery. Anyway, they bought time, and then they had this competition after a while, and this is how we found it, from different angles. And at the end, this is our proposal. Maybe not that different, maybe not that different at all. Still, you recognize here the white loggia in front, but what did we do? We just opened it totally, and then we go, you can connect it back to that painting we made in the beginning. We opened all the windows so the building became open. You see the roof, it's still the wooden roof construction which is there till today, because the tiles were taken away already before we arrived, and the building was totally filled with water from the winter that came over it. We took away everything so the building could breathe. We walk closer, and that's what you see. All floors on ground floor were taken because we wanted that it could rain and snow inside. We took away all the plasterwork so that the brickwork could breathe. And we we made some corrections. For example, at this point, you remember from the image, there was a little bulldozer that drove in before we arrived, and it needed to be restored. And then, as I say, that this building, this project for us, was a mind shift in all directions. Not only that you are confronted with a non-program, non-functionality and so on, but also take into account the available budget, low budget at all. Also that needed to reshift our thinking in how to help the things, not how to make the things, but how to help the things to become somehow sustainable throughout the next decades. And for example, this is a detail we never made a detailed drawing about, but we talked about with the contractor how to do. And he had the freedom to fill in the reparation as he wanted. We come closer. You see that we added in the building few greenhouses, non-conditioned spaces, but spaces that gives you a certain protection for a while. The idea is, of course, it is a non-technology building. It is a low-technology building. There is some electricity for the lighting at night. There is some water tap, but there is no conditioning. You have and you will live it as you find it, season by season. The only technology, the first complaint and the only complaint we got in the beginning was that there was no Wi-Fi. And that's the only thing that has been added, Wi-Fi routers. So Wi-Fi as a new foundation of architecture, imagine. So what we did is we just revealed everything. The wooden floors became free so they could breathe. We planted a tree. We took exactly the same electricity or lightning poles as we found in the park. We did not design them. We took away the floor with the basement, which was in a bad condition, and that helped us on spot to develop the idea of a small auditorium. There is a nursery school around, and when spring comes, maybe not this spring, but when spring comes, they gather there to have their lessons outside. The old chimney, the technical chimney of the heating room below, where we filled it with ground to give the tree some soil, we opened it and made a fireplace out of it. A fireplace where at the evening the youngsters who are living in the institute today gather around wood. When we are there, and often when we are there, or people are there, sometimes you do not see a lot of people. Interesting. We also talked in the beginning with the client, the director and his team, and we said, well, why don't you organize not more events? And they said, well, that's not the way it works. In psychiatry, mostly treatment is personal. It's not a group event. And though you can categorize people into different types of diseases and perspectives, at the end, it's always a personal thing. So yes, what happened a lot that we see people walking in alone, or youngsters, couple of gathering, also children playing around. They said that, what is nice on the building so far is that, yes, there is no program and no one knew ahead what or how it should be used, but at the end it is used. And it is used and it is appreciated by everyone, even by those who do not dare to enter the building. The therapist said to us, even that is important. So there is activity, don't worry, there is activity. But again, for an architect who is raised to design spaces with functionalities, with program, with efficient use of space. When we design nowadays schools, they should be also available in the weekend and after school and so on. Everything should be constantly on. I talked about the shift in how to constructing, about the shift that there is no program. Everything here in the project for us was a different way or needed a different way of thinking. Here again, this kind of way they stitched all the little scarves in it. And then one gets, and that's strange to say, one gets sometimes really emotional comments. Like one of the patients over there told that what she really liked about the building is that at the end, mostly people arriving at psychiatry, they are kind of given up. And you can treat and you can heal, but at the end, it always has its scarves. And that the lady said that she appreciated that building symbolically so much that it was a building which was given up, it was ready for demolition. But look what happened. It has been recovered, but the scarves are clearly still there. So more images on this. Maybe a last thing to point. The windowsills, wood, we took them away, stones were damaged. We decided to just simply pour some concrete and to accept what happened when the concrete would become in between formwork and wall. But then there was a day, you can't see it on the image, blue sky, white clouds. We arrived there, and a kind of wave said, hey, why don't we paint them white like the white clouds in the sky? A couple of weeks later, the contractor's daughter, 2 weeks long in Easter holidays, painted all the concrete white. This project, in that sense, in any direction, it was a surprise for ourselves, a surprise in a way how we have to change thinking, but also a surprise in a way how a building was accepted, how a building was taken over. Some images, as you can see, with children, or some Sunday afternoon, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, I conclude with this image. A project which came on our desk, we finally could realize, but to me, which was a project of critical care, as it is said, not only for care, but also a critical thinking, for at least for myself as an architect, in the practice on how to change things, how to change approaches. For me, not as said earlier, just recapping the reuse as a reuse, but understanding the many different lines it might give direction, might get direction to. Some old images from activities in the old days, differently than today. You see the Sisters of Mercy, Catholic Institute. Anyway, as said, this project gives us the chance to present it in the 2018 Free Space Biennale by Shelley and Yvonne, Grafton architects, as we know, Pritzker Prize winner since a couple of weeks, and I believe this is what it should be. And there we presented the project with large-scale images on wooden frames with the size of rooms, one could say, a room size of the original rooms that were in the building. And this wood has a special meaning. This wood is now back in Belgium, and this wood will be used for the restoration of the floors. As we said that we wanted to have a long-term collaboration with them, this was also not only because we think that the idea on how the use could be of the building could change at any time, but also, of course, as we as architects wanted to stay aside to see how the building will or could decay throughout time. And for example, in the floors, though they can breathe, we will restore the first parts. This wood in the Venice Biennale is the wood we will use for that. But even more important than just showing this Venice Biennale exhibition is that on the occasion of it, we made a workbook. This is not the first time we made a workbook. We made also one for Bravoure Scarcity Beauty Biennale when we were curating the Belgium Pavilion 2012. And this Unless Ever People book is in fact a book which has the graphical quality to have on the right side the 97 images taken by Philippe Dujardin, but on the left side it only has text, and text by everyone involved, and text in a total open atmosphere. That will mean that there are comments on the projects, doubts on the projects included, that there are ways like this kind of structural way, how you can realize something. This is the director's idea, but also people who stayed there or doctors had comments in the book. For us as an architecture practice, of course, you are used to make books which are about architecture pur sang, in which you celebrate it from the beginning to the end, and philosophy, whole philosophies on architecture as such, but here it is about the use of the building, about the idea of the future use of the building and what psychiatry and space can do. I'm not going into detail, but I believe when we talk about the Venice Biennale, to me the booklet is more important than the exhibition. Here you see an image of a project at the back side and another project on the front side. Because one could say, of course, what happened with that building? Is it not too unique to become generally true? I can show, or I will show another project after this. I don't think so. But what is more in my interest is that we look now to the left side building, which has also been initiated by the director of the psychiatric clinic, and is an initiation without an architect. And what's the story, in fact? Well, in fact, there was, until then, a very perverse system of subsidy. That's it, that you could get 100% subsidized for your new hospital building, but never for the renovation of an old one, if the renovation was more expensive than 70% of the cost price of a new one. That's one of the reasons why in the 60s, 70s, 80s, all those buildings disappeared so quickly, because the architects were handy enough to explain to the Sister of Mercy that it was almost impossible to adapt them to regulations, but also to adapt them to budgets. Here, and you can see it on nice spaces. Okay, architecturally wise, things could be different, but a nice selection of old furniture, also introduction of new furniture by a furniture designer called Philippe Alais. It even didn't cost 60%. And I like to bring this building into, though it's not mine, but I like to bring it into the idea of Caritas project, because the Caritas project can be appreciated by our project, but I think it must be appreciated by the many, many different experiments that happen over there, and that are, my opinion, seemingly a very critical position towards architectural thinking. The people here are happy. Why not? Nowadays, as we sit, we are still in contact. We still talk, first sketches and first new drawings on how we will change the building soon. We will move out some greenhouse outside, as they wish to have one in the green, on the green grass field. And on the other hand, also, for example, they like to have more free space on the ground floor. We listen, we suggest, we talk. Slowly, things will change soon. In-between project. We collect images all the time. This is an image of a fence. It's an image taken by Inge Vinck, who unfortunately cannot be with us, but maybe she's listening in. I hope everything goes fine over there. And this is a fence that has been repaired with aluminium paper. We don't know whether it's an artist or a young people that wanted to amuse themselves or someone who was annoyed, but it's a beautiful repair. Years ago, we were at the Mies van der Rohe Tugendhat house, where was a beautiful handrail. It was damaged throughout its history, not only architectural history, but also European history. And someone had repaired the damaged chrome by silver tape. We captioned a lot of elements of the house at that time, but for example, this one was a really one that stayed with us. The beauty of the cheapest silver tape, duct tape, and the very enriched, rich chrome. A couple of years later, we were invited. We make also objects and furniture and stuff. And in a gallery, we were invited to do some things. And we designed a small silver table, it's called. It's a black metal polished with diamond. In fact, nothing special. But when you polish it it got mirrored. And you get this beauty. The above one is just revealed to the open air. Normally, then you lock it with chrome. We don't lock it. And if you don't lock it, it slowly starts to oxidate again. The one below is an example of one that has been contaminated, one could say, by humidity. And of course, if you have it at home and you had a party and you forgot to take the glasses the next day, this party will be forever in the beauty of that mirrored piece. For us, I connect it to what happens in Caritas or in the First House or in many other projects. This is maybe, I would say, a small critical note on the idea how sustainable things should be. Maybe a certain progress of decay, of change, even though can be kind of like same idea on how things could change throughout times and not just lock them totally constantly. I think this critical thinking we should keep in mind the moment as today we build always forever. We say we build dynamic and flexible and it can be changed throughout the decades that come, but the economy we use for that makes it almost impossible to change us ever. I was very happy later on when I understood, because we were there before the restoration, that also after the restoration, luckily that became not a kind of freaky architectural show of restoration, but a very caretaken restoration. And what you see is that they did not restore the handrail. Later on, we started to make more objects, and for example, the silver tape stayed with us. This is a kind of building pole, as you all know, carefully taped. Carefully taped. Again, a gallery sells those things. We can come at your house, install some poles in your space, so we can change maybe the idea of element of space, the way you use your space. Those things are extremely important for us also, that we can, I would say, if it's about, I would not say about theory, about philosophy, about research, but it are those little objects we make that often mirror ideas in the architecture as we make, or at least helps us to understand or to explain sometimes the things as we like to let them moving on. I don't know why it switched, but no problem, it comes back. Sometimes doing something poetic can become political. Sometimes doing something political can become poetic. I wished I had written those two sentences myself, but they have been written by Francis Alice, a Belgian artist living in Mexico City, raised originally as an architect. Interesting to understand that feature. But what I like that much about these two sentences is how poetic and political are connected. Almost the two extenses of how we like to think about things, or how we see things. And of course, with his works, he has, of course, he says this when you take his work in mind. I'm not going to talk about Alice, and maybe I use the sentences in a different way, but somehow. This is a project where the building site today is in full movement. Well, not exactly those weeks anymore. This is a city of Charleroi, which is the French-spoken part of Belgium. And what you see here is an exhibition space, Palais des Expos, that has been delivered just in 1970, and this is one of the last months, one of the last years, before the finishing of the building site. It's a 66 square meter tall building. The photographer is at the tower of the Belfort, of the town hall, and he looks over the landscape where you see the terrace. Charleroi was one, at that moment in Europe, as many other cities in Wallonia and Germany, one of the main industrial areas. Metal industry in this case, this is not mining. And by that, it enriched enormously. Cynically, when the building was delivered in 1977, the whole European heavy industry in Europe collapsed heavily, like in a couple of months. And at the end, the building will never serve where it was meant to, namely to become an exhibition hall for the heavy industry. A couple of years ago, Charleroi is now one of those zones in Europe who is getting subsidies from European community as the economy is really, really bad. It has almost nothing to do in Charleroi. They got subsidy 30 million euros. This building needs, in fact, like 120 to 150 million euros if you want to renovate it completely. The city of Charleroi, in that sense, was smart, and they made a competition, and they said, you see, this middle part there, that's called the lobby zone, it's 12,000 square meter big. The other pieces on the side are the exhibition spaces, 3-level heights. And to give you an impression, each level is between 7 to 9 meters floor to floor. It can bear 3 tons per square meter. Anyway, the city of Charleroi did the competition on the middle zone and said, let's make of that a kind of new building with an expression of nowadaysness in architecture, and on top it should be zero energy. To us, this was totally contradictory. And we looked to this image, and this image inspired us. Those are images we took the moment we had won. We went in, and you can see with me how gigantic this building was that has never served for anything. This is this middle lobby space, pure concrete. The colors are fake. I mean, they have been added at a certain decade. No one knows the story, has nothing to do with Sotsas or whatever. It's not original at all. But look to the beauty glazed above roof parts. This is how we found it. Our proposal was this image. We proposed to open the middle part totally and to make an urban park out of it. No energy saving, no techniques, no nowadays architecture anymore. An urban park that connects the upper city and the lower city together. You could walk through it. On the left side, by that we gained a lot of money. We only needed 1/3 of the foreseen money to make that come through. And we saved 2/3 to technically upgrade the other parts of the building. So on the left side, where there was no money for foreseen, we have now asbestos-free roofs, insulated, all new techniques. So what you basically need to make an exhibition space out of it. On the right side, it's a parking building. It was foreseen, they asked in the competition to dig out another level under it for a parking building, which was crazy because we said also in our competition entry, you will never use again the 66,000 square meter. So what's all this need? Make a parking building on the right side. That very moment you might need it, 10 days each year, you just rent plastic tents full of climatization, but that climate cost does not wait up to digging out and so on. So our proposal was one of economy, was one of strategy, was one of politics. It was over the summer we made this competition, and we were very sharp, very sure about what we proposed. But on the other hand, of course, we knew that we did not fulfill any demand of the competition. Totally unexpected, we won it. We knew after that also, and we thank the local government for that, they did everything to make this in a juridical way acceptable. This is, I believe, what or where it should be about. And there I dare to bring Francis Alice's quote on politics and poetics here, because I believe architecture, we have arrived, and I think hopefully even more after what happens now over the world, We are right at the moment that we should be daring to get us more involved in strategy, politics, daring to be critical towards the questions that are raised to us. Anyway, today it's a pleasure. The project is made together with Agua Architects from Brussels and with Doors on Interieur Architecten. And for example, yes, we also demolish parts, but the old columns, they will be collected and they will be used as benches. We take care of everything at that site. But at this moment, with the same budget, which was only foreseen to realize architecture, and maybe at a certain point, we realize architecture also, but not by wanting it to realize as an addition or whatever so. Still, we are puzzled today on the building site, and we find zones in the building. This is not a Philippe Dujardin collage. He would have wished, but this is the structure of the building. We expect to be ready within 2 years, and then there will be a new park and connection addition in the city that connects the upper and lower city. This is a work of Flemish-Swiss artist Ante Timmermans, mostly Flemish, I have to say. And it's about a project I would like to explain. It's again not a project which is of our office. I mean, the image is about the competition in which he was involved. But his proposal, he named it Mettre en jeu, op het spel zetten. Difficult to translate in English, I would say, dare to take risks. The title of this lecture is that it does not look good makes that it looks good. It were those years, Caritas, Charleroi, all those projects came to us and pushed us back in the way we were thinking and forced us to change the way of approach. And there was a small job, it was called a pavilion. We were invited to make a pavilion in a park on the occasion of a festival of art and music. And this is a sample of a small pavilion as we made it. This is the pavilion. What is a pavilion? You know, pavilion is mostly, comes at a time it wants to represent a kind of optimism, a kind of new technology, a kind of new era. It has a lot of messages. It is top, it is what pavilions always are. Mostly also to be demolished after what exactly happened with this pavilion, though it was not meant to. But anyway, what happens? We made a pavilion, and we were maybe at that moment a little bit, I don't know exactly what the psychology was of our mind, but we were a little bit bored with this idea of making it the best. And we said, let's do some things one should not do, or what we should not do. And you see a basement in concrete. It has been given formwork with planks as they are still there, benches we made later out of them. And those planks, yeah, they lead to this kind of rough concrete. It's not well done. Then we stacked blocks, not even in bond. We called the engineer and we asked some armature in it, reinforcement, and then we poured concrete from above. We made a kind of roof out of concrete. It's a snow finishing on top, and we asked the engineer to decrease the amount of armature in it so that after a while it would bend a little bit and it would let flow the water in a natural way away. And the outcome of the concrete we poured in it, we cast it a little bit, is what it is. Look, this was an earlier stage on the occasion of the opening, as it was still not ready, in fact. But the message was what you see here. It became a conglomerate. I don't think that making a conglomerate is a really architectural gesture. But at the end, it stood there, strong. Ecologists loved it. They said, bats, insects, everything can go in. The Sunday traveler or visitor said, ugly. Let's forget about it. It should be demolished. But for us, it turned out to be something like, well, it's so opposite to how we are daily and day out taking care of the details, well, we took care also of details, but at least they confronted us again in the way we approach things. A philosopher, architectural crit came and said, miss. I said, okay, miss, well, if you want, if you wish. But somehow, this pavilion became maybe not the expression of this huge optimism of technology and future and whatever. On the other hand, to me, it was an expression of the optimism of the basic, the optimism of the direct way of making things. Still, I don't know exactly what I really should think about it, but at the end, it's got this title, that it does not look good makes that it looks good. At least to me, it looks not too bad. The commission came from the Agency of Waters and Forests in Flanders, and this commissioner was also the one who had to give building permit. They made a mistake. And to avoid any small political scandal, they demolished the pavilion, and from one on the other day, the day they understood that they made a building permit mistake. Well, that's what should happen with pavilions. So it didn't stood longer than half a year, but a year after, the festival was there again, and the curators of the festival asked us whether we could rebuild it again. And we said, maybe we don't rebuild it again. Let's make a reenactment. Well, irony. Why not? Still today, the only thing left over is the concrete plate. And it seems that no one is taking efforts to take that away. This is an image I took one summer in August in Zurich, in Switzerland, at San Gottardo, when you go over the San Gottardo, better than to go through. Anyway, today there won't be too much people around, but that summer day was sunny. Everyone is there, tourists, cyclists, nothing special. At the end, nothing special, at least the way I took the image here. Another year, same moment, same spot. Humidity, gray, rain, no one. But all of a sudden, things that you could not define or you could not observe in the one situation were very prominent in the other situation. The electricity pile, the statue, the traffic sign, the chapel, the little staircase. I like to bring those two images always, the moment that there is something like, yeah, but what is it really about then for you? And then I would say, well, it's that moment in architecture that we can bring things together that have seemingly nothing to do with each other. But the way how we bring them together makes that all of a sudden they seem to have something to do with each other. Recently, I think this is the last project, I'm pretty sure, I returned back with Philippe Dujardin to a project we did. It must be now like, I would not say 10 years ago, but almost. It's a very small, it's called Belgium. It's a kind of very small spot in the city of Ghent, full of 19th century houses that had been realized in the textile industry by it was kind of very interesting city development plan. When the textile industry entered in Europe, Ghent was one of the first, and the investors built houses to attract the poor farmers from the countryside to come and work. It was a huge social program, never seen until then. And in Ghent, we have 10,000 of those houses. And later on, everything changed. Those houses have been sold in private sense, and people started to make their own small house of it. And we were at a certain moment invited, it's like 10 years ago it must have been, maybe a little bit shorter, by a young artist who bought 2 houses and asked us to help her out in a very basic way to connect the 2 houses. And we presented a kind of collection of found windows everywhere, collected them to a kind of big window, but quality of windows, same like the other windows around. And we added it as a kind of small front gallery with a small staircase in to connect the two houses not only, but also to connect level, ground level and above level. But going back with Philippe, it came back to me that this project to me, although we had a little bit forgotten about it, became a project of this time. A question that maybe after Caritas and after Charleroi and after the pavilion could be found back also in the way, like in the first house I showed, how can we make houses? And not in the sense that we try to, with architecture, arrive to that point of how can we live a house, but rather how can we house life? I mean, architecture as a supporting and not as a way of life, but as a way to support life. Anyway, I'm happy that we return with Philippe, and I'd like to go back to the project and think and move on with it in other senses and projects we're working on right now. But to me, it's a kind of like nice end of the start of the project I presented, namely turn back to that idea how we can organize life. This is an image of Soluit and a gallery porch house, the porch entry of a gallery that left, abandoned the beautiful city palace, as we call it, and then a new landlord installed studios, and I believe 23, and asked the electrician to organize doorbells and a light switch. And the electrician nicely lined it up. You can say it's the murder on an art piece, on the dogma, but on the other hand, for me, I took it when, I don't know if I was graduating or if I was graduated already. It's an analog image, that's why it looks a little bit dizzy. But to me, it always fascinated me. And I think that I can add that to the whole idea of I like to look to the things nowadays. Those are the new lamps of our office. We installed them and they were far too bright. And collaborators designed all kinds of small objects with stuff around in the office to diffuse light and to make the light bearable. Recently, we listed up some words. As I said in the beginning, form, life, urge. I think this first line to me is where I would like to think about in this very near future. Of course, let's make architecture still something which is about form, but let's underline in the middle the idea of to live and to live and to live, and then maybe today, more than whenever, urge. What do we need right now? How we can act right now? And then there are others around, low ambition, maybe fix things. Make it done, not too long. I played with his words many games, and we are on it, but it's just a kind of, to me, resume of what I came to show. Today, as introduced by Felix, we opened another architecture office also, again, Inge and I, and we connected to that word Universum Carrousel Journey as a kind of like of ongoing creation of a world that could be a kind of travel or journey. You can find back all this stuff on soon, because we are still under construction, let's say. But we have kind of like nice Instagrams, like this Vylder and Vinck Inge, in which we share those first new ideas and thinking. We are thankful to the parcours we have been driving, not only the practice of today, but of course the practice, the Vylder Vinck taillieu, but also the practices ahead of it. You see, it's a journey, it's a carousel, the practice even changes constantly. And maybe now I like to introduce you just as a wave out, and at the time of today, some side things, the so-called whatever things we are working on. And I'm happy to show you some things which maybe we should experience today more. Those are drawings we made on the occasion of boredom. We didn't know what to do. We were on the airplane. We were at the evening at home. We don't have television. we got a little bit bored and we make drawings. And those drawings are called the Excel sheet drawings. And, well, we had a lot of them, and we even started with some collaborators to make more of them. We have like hundreds of them in the meantime. But at the same time, to me, this idea of making them has to do with the fact, like, you know, this is a calculation sheet. It's an Excel sheet, but we use it totally in a different way. We were astonished that it was picked up soon. And some art bookmakers, a new magazine, Gallery magazine, in combination with art paper editions, they made a book out of it. We love it that our first architecture book has nothing to do with architecture. That it has to do with the opportunity to be able, or at least the ambition, or at least the love, to go beyond and find ways to use things differently. Finally, Inge at the end, where I'm maybe more responsible for this kind of free drawings, she restarted to redraw projects we made. It's also included in a booklet. And later on, we will find in Ghent huge flags. This is a collage of a 55 square meter tall flag. And all over the city, the flags will be for a moment available. But for me, I show it today because I think for everyone locked down, let's just do some things which has to do with boredom. Let's do just some things we never should have done before. Let's do it and just enjoy it. This Excel sheet mania even will deliver us a new website soon. I will not go into detail, but it's of course a very practical instrument to order thoughts and things. Secondly, maybe really do stupid things and let's communicate them the days coming. This is a longer or a shorter version of a longer reportage on Instagram, which is about sharpening the pencils. Only that. Let's do stupid things the days that come and see what comes out of it. I won't show them all. I will switch soon to the backside. To maybe why they needed to be sharpened. I'm looking forward to find now days and afternoons to make drawings of my context around me, the kitchen space. And move on with the kitchen space. Thank you. Okay, questions? There are? I don't believe. That's not a question.
It seems that you are as interested in the birth of architecture for the architectural ideal as you are in the life of that creation after you walk away. It seems that you are as interested in the birth of architecture for the architectural idea as you are in the life of that creation after you walk away.
Yes, there's a question, maybe.
Yes, that was a question.
As far as I understand the question very well, and I do think, yes, I'm very intrigued with what happens we move away. And I'm very much aware or very much concerned about the idea that when we leave, we probably leave a little bit too early. Leaving earlier, the party is always nicer than waiting when all the daylight goes on. And that gives the, I think for me, and moreover, like also now that project that I picked up, the small house again, for me it's very important that create opportunities, that we create backgrounds, that architecture can be something which does not want to be at the front, but might come to the front since the way it can be used, it is different. I'm interested, or we should check, I think, what could be the new balance between to live the architecture or the architecture that make living possible.
Victor Cartier writes, "Hello, I have a question about the psychiatric center in Mette. I didn't know how to hear everything about the conference, so I don't know if you already talked about it. Today, only the ground floor." I should not have read that one. The question is incomplete, so Victor, if you would like to resubmit your question, that would be great. Andrea Wang writes, "Yes, what term did he use for the white pavilion, like additions to the second project, psychiatric facility? What term did you use for the white pavilions that you added to the psychiatric facility?"
Just loggias.
Loggia, the Italian word loggia.
Yeah, loggia. In the first question about, and that's nice to talk about, initially, only the ground, after delivery of the building, only the ground floor of the building was available. And of course, this comes because of security reasons. One has to know we are in a very severe condition of psychiatry. That means, I tell it straight away, suicidal attempts are not weekly but monthly part of the scenery. So as the stages were meant to be free, well, there came at the end an agreement with the security service to have doors that could be opened when personnel and people wanted to enter to the first and the second floor. After 3 years, beginning last year, we had the first talk with the people over there to recap and to change the building here and there, so greenhouses in and out, as I showed. Occasionally, coincidentally, at the morning at the director's office, a young patient who was a couple of months already there, almost a year, came to the director and he started to debate with the director, knowing that the building would change, and he said, "Please make the levels above free." "Yes," said the director, "but security does not allow." The young man kept on going and he said, "You have to trust us. Trust should be a part of the treatment." I can tell you, the second floor is closed, but the first floor is open now. And towards everyone is astonished that since it is open, nothing happened. So it was for the director, also for us, and also for the security people, something strange, something good to understand, and it pushed everyone again back in his usual way of reacting on everything: security, safety, responsibility. So the second floor, of course, because the height is, of course, it has much more impact if someone jumps. But the first floor is open since ever. I had to say in the beginning there was quite a debate if the project ever could be possible. Because, of course, we don't call it a ruin. It's not a ruin anymore, it's a contradiction of a ruin. But the atmosphere of it, the romantic atmosphere of it, is, of course, has the friction with suicidal attempt. The director said, we go on, because there is a forest, there is a train passing by, there is a highway passing by, and even the lowest plant can be used to get done what you want to do with your life. So again, this is a beautiful mind shift for everyone once more.
Thank you. I just want to insert here, Lorena Del Rio writes, "Fantastic lecture, Jan. Thank you very much for your insightful work." And Lorena was working with you to bring your talk to Cooper Union, so I want to let you know she's really appreciative. Another question that's just come in, which is sort of interesting, a little redirect, is how do you, from Azul Clicks, how do you think architecture education has to change? Considering with the specific moment we are living today, you talked about the idea of reuse. Maybe this has to be further thought about.
Yes. Well, I would not like by the word reuse to limit the architectural debate. I do think, though, that the local resources, the things we have, should become the most important resources we have. That's of course true. But on the other hand, every time you put in front of the word architecture something like, for example, sustainable architecture, to me, it feels like limiting the capacity of architecture. So then when it comes to education, I do not believe, though, for example, we organize ourselves, for example, 33% exercises in ETH studios in which we study with students the impact of only interventions of 33% in the aim of finding economy, in the aim of finding efficiency. On the other hand, I think that also architecture education, and that's maybe with my first word, form, also still should study typology, history, reference, and so on. If it comes to architectural education, I'm writing a note right now which has this title, Form, Life, Urge. I do think that we only can deliver interesting viewpoints on architecture, interesting work, if we balance between this idea of the understanding of architectural thinking, theory, philosophy, on one hand, and on the other hand, passing by life to the idea of urge. What is now on? What should we now do with this world? What is happening and how do we react? How can we react on that? To me, in my architectural teaching, and especially from next year on, I will work out this kind of pendula between the understanding of architectural words, grammatica, on the one hand, on the other hand, the daily, immediate thing we need. That's, to me, very important to keep, I would not say a spread in architecture, but legs open on two different parts where it is about.
Two more kind of related questions. I'll say them right together. Zekun Tong asks, how does the four-color word playing affect your thinking of design? Does each color mean something specific to you? And then Brecht Locke says, the use of color in your design, in railings and beams, is prominent in your design. How did you choose those colors?
Well,
the role of color.
The four colors in the writing and so on is just based on the fact that those are the most basic colors one can travel with a pencil. You can buy it everywhere, you can get it everywhere, and for so long that I write and that I draw, one will find back drawings which are based on those four basic colors. It's a very, very practical thing. And how does it affect? Well, sometimes it affects real clearly, and one could connect those colors to feelings or to kind of directions. On the other hand, how can I say, like this drawing which right on right now, it's beautiful, isn't it? And then when it comes to the color in the work, I know we are situated as being freaking out with green columns and beams. And on the occasion of the new digital platform we are creating, the website, which will not be only something you can visit, but on which you will be able to contribute. That's something else. But on the occasion of that, I marked all the projects which has a green column or a green color in it. And it's very disappointing. It are only 7 projects all over the career, but everyone thinks constantly it's green. Now the story of the green is much nicer. The story is that on a building site one day we had a metal construction introduced, and the contractor, when I arrived, was painting it in that green. Normally you should have a green protected paint, not just a protected paint, which is normally rather reddish, rather brown, and then you bring the color as you wish. And I said to the guy, well, first of all, I've never ordered this color, and secondly, I think you forgot the underlayer. You should. And then he said, no, don't worry, it's a small brand, and the color of the brand is this green. But what a beautiful green. What a beautiful green. And ever since, here and there, the green comes back, and every lecture I got a question, what is this about the green? And every time I'm happy to tell it the way I told it now, just to understand also that to me this is the occasion of architecture. Architecture as an occasion, as a moment, not as a result of a wider, large-scale reflection, but just what happened at the moment. And so far, I did not met anyone saying, please, this ugly green.
Pia de Vylder writes, sorry, do you have any thoughts about what architecture should not be about?
This is quite personal, I have to say, my daughter. And I know exactly what she's pointing at. And I had to say, I was planned to bring it into the lecture. I thought I did, but seemingly not. And it was a text, a small little text in color blue, green, red, as has been mentioned before, in which I had something written like, the moment that I saw what architecture could not be about, it was like I saw also where it could be about. And that she asks it me right now is because she knows that I'm in a doubtful mind on how or what it could be about. And then I say to her, well, let's say, I found it a very interesting moment to not know where it should be about. And also having given this lecture, it might sound as being very sure on many topics, but at the end, it's all about doubts at this moment. But I believe those doubts, though we urgently need maybe action, at least I like to play then there the doubtful mind the moment we all need action right away. So architecture to me should be about questioning today, rather than answering, though it is said we immediately, urgently should answer everything.
A somewhat related question, which I found interesting by ETH Zurich. Could you comment on authorship by creation versus authorship by intervention? For you, are they the same or different, and how?
That's of course a question I think that should be framed a little bit more. What is meant? But
I would interpret that as the projects that you showed today always begin with something that you then interact with. You never begin with a blank, which somehow also relates to some of the other questions that address issues of that there's no drawings that you showed. You showed some sketches from an early competition, but that your process of working, there's always a found object, a dialogue that you're establishing, really close dialogue with another character, which is the found, the given.
Yes. I think to me, as said, it is an ongoing process. It is something of which I, at a certain point, don't want to recognize the start point, I would say, because it's not just the first sketch you make. Sometimes you make a sketch or an idea. Sometimes we use the idea, let's do something we would not like to do. And we find out how amazingly interesting this is. And then at the end point, for example, I don't know exactly where the end point is. Leaving early is to me one of the interesting keys there. Not to keep things unfinished. That's the thing. The question might be raised, and often it's raised, why are your things so unfinished? And I say, they are not unfinished. They are just not finished. That's quite different. Unfinished sounds like, well, you didn't took the energy anymore to finalize it. No. We keep them, we don't finish them, to keep them open to, let's say, other authorship, to other ways of getting into it. I remember me that I didn't show the project, but one of the first taller or larger scale projects we built, Les Ballets de l'Abbé, which is a dance studio and a theater studio. When we built it, it was also economy of means, and later on the commissioner got more money, and they invited us to add the kitchen. They could not have built first, and the elevator that was missing, and all kind of diverse sprawl program. And they asked us, as they were very happy with the building, say, please now, please do. And then we invented a kind of small commissions towards French architects saying, well, we will not do this. But please, can you take care of the elevator? Can you take care of the kitchen? Can you take care of this part of the program? And maybe you could design that part of the program. To me, as far as I amuse myself in this, as far as I like this kind of always energy that comes from different corners into the projects, ideas, people that enter and have an idea. The first project we showed with the drawing of the bricks on those tiles, it has been quite a process with the client, but he was so convinced. He said in the beginning, okay, tiles, cool, but what about the wall? What about the wall? And then we kept on going, what about the wall? And we started to make those paintings on it and tests and so on and so on and so on. Well, of course, maybe the authorship in project, of our authorship in project is there. I would not neglect it or would say it does not exist. But if it's, the authorship to me has to do with the fact that we want to be open to participation of everyone in that project at that time.
Perhaps another term is, instead of unfinished, would be unfinalized.
Unfinalized, that's exactly better.
Probably right. There are many more questions. I think they're all, I hope, permanently there for you to take a look at later. I think we're going to try to bring this to a close. I do want to say, Jan, I think, I was going to say this at the beginning, but I think it's a better end. I think we met, or maybe we didn't meet, 2 years ago when our good friend, mutual friend, Angela Pang invited us to lunch to see if we could make this happen. And after 2 years of chatting back and forth, we finally made it happen. And I think it's just kind of interesting that the semester has somehow also been unfinalized. And I really look forward to further conversations with you, Jan.
Okay,
thank you so much for doing this. Really
Happy
appreciate
to be
it.
here. And it's crazy to be in this unbelievable OMA building in an empty space giving lecture.
Well, you
it's
filled
very
it up.
fascinating.
Thank you.
Okay, stay all safe and